Hi, Chris Curry, COB. I just wanted to say I'm a big supporter of complicating the narrative around Burma Road riot. And I want to suggest 3 ways that we can do that. First of all, I think it's worthwhile to note that Burma Road did not happen in isolation. It was part of a larger pan-Caribbean expression of tumult and angst that I think grew out of the period that Franklin Knight has coined an accelerated agitation that was also born out of the Garvey movement and Marcus Garvey's work in the Bahamas and the Pan-African consciousness that I think ignited a desire for change. I also believe that there was an international dimension, as I think Stephen has pointed out, obviously with World War II. And all of that, I think, brought together a moment that incited Bahamians to not just sit down, but to stand up and fight. That brings me, so you have to have a pan-Caribbean and international dimension to approaching Burma Road. I think that's an important element. My second way of complicating the narrative, or at least creating more narratives, I think is to suggest a gender dimension to the riot. And again, I think you mentioned this. It wasn't just about these laborers, a few guys who decided they didn't want to take, this anymore, the work conditions. But understand, if you read Faith That Moved the Mountains, Ron Hooks' narrative, he talks about the groundswell of people on Bay Street, women and children. So this went beyond just a few men working, construction workers. This clearly was agitation on a level that brought in women and children.
Nonsense.
And I really would like to suggest...
Nonsense. No women and children were on Bay Street.
No, there were.
I know that.
Yeah, so the point that I'd like to make is not enough has been done to look at this issue of gender in the Burma Road riot. And I think this points right back to the idea that was articulated about it being a bread and butter issue. Because if you think about it, that would be very close to the heart of those in the home, okay? And so it wasn't just about men, it was men and women across gender lines. And I think we need to look at that. A third area that I would also suggest that might be useful for complicating the Burma Road riot is to think about how we silence historical narratives itself. And I'm thinking about The Power and Production of History, one of my favorite books written by a Haitian anthropologist. And in that, I got you, Ian. In that, the study is suggesting there's certain stories that don't get told. And what I'm suggesting is we don't learn enough, or we haven't read enough about people like Leonard Green, the same individual who went into the building with a wound on his head, his eye, above his eye. And we memorialize the 4 that died in the Flamingo incidents in 1980. But we do not memorialize those that fought in the Burma Road riot. So why is it that we don't do that? Why is it that we're not commemorating adequately until now those freedom fighters in the Burma Road riot? I suggest it goes back to what Keisha was saying about this image, this identity that we want to perpetuate of a docile people. So someone like Leonard Green doesn't fit neatly into that narrative. And so I think another way of complicating our narratives is to think about ways that we can memorialize those who actually fought for freedom during the Burma Road riot. Thank you.
I just want to respond on one aspect of your presentation, and that is why predominantly the persons who gave their lives, basically, and those who were injured, why they were not celebrated or are not celebrated. What actually happened was, immediately after the riot, the participants were actually criminalized. A lot of them, I think 32 of them, were jailed. And the families were afraid of reprisals, so a lot of them moved out of the area. Several of them changed their names, and a lot of them claimed that they were from Turks Island. And so that in itself caused it, one of the main reasons that caused the sacrifice not to be celebrated. Thank you.
Disclosure, I'm a recovering politician, so I'm also not a recovering trade unionist. I was a trade unionist in my teenage years, and I am still a trade unionist. I've always looked at the Burma Road strike as that, a strike, not a riot. I believe that it was caused to become a riot by the colonial power structure at the time, because first of all, it was necessary to keep people, as Keisha suggested, in this docile situation. And a riot, as a comedy movie said once, is an ugly thing. And once it was a riot, no one wanted to be associated with that because it was bad. And therefore, the language was used by the colonial structure, demonized it, as you said, Reverend Stewart, which caused people to run away from it. I am not one of those that believes that the 42 strike caused the creation of the PLP. I believe that the PLP came out of something else, and it came out of that post-war universal discussion around the wrong of colonialism, and those young men and women who were offshore studying in universities, who were a part of that conversation, coming back home either on vacations or by letters or otherwise, encouraged the discussion here. And it is out of that, and it is out of the effort of a few brown men, H.M. Taylor, Stevenson, and one other man who died just not too long ago, Mr. Cartwright, a Long Islander. H.M. was a Long Islander, who decided that they, brown men, had a right to a say. And they started that conversation, they started that movement. Again, part of that pan-Caribbean activity where brown people were encouraged to believe they were better than black people, but not as good as white people. And that there was an opportunity, if they knew their place, to work with the power structures in place. They were very much a part of that conversation, an opportunity to be a part of that. Also, consider that within that time frame, before 49, in order to vote, you had to own property, and you had to be male. So during the 42 riot, there was no consideration among most of those people who would have been involved who didn't own property, that they were making a political statement. They were after an opportunity to be equated as equal with other people who were working on the same project they were working on. Now, yeah, they did not necessarily understand the economics of skills, value, and all that sort of thing, and that's understandable. And the reason that they accepted a 25% increase and that free lunch was such that they believed that was a powerful movement forward for them income-wise. And if you're making do with 4 shillings and you get 5 shillings, well, that's a considerable improvement over your prior condition, even though it's not enough. Stephen, you suggested that we're in similar straits now. Kerry suggested we're in similar straits now. I believe so, because we continue in our society to deny that we have a large number of our population who are living hand to mouth. We have a large portion of our population who are being pushed through the school system to come out at the end of when they're 16 or 17 functionally illiterate. And we accept that while we continue to support the concept that our economy belongs to us when we import great swathes of foreign labor to create foreign-owned product, to then sell that product overseas and use labor that's local, that's Bahamian, only in service roles. And we believe that serves the Bahamian economy. It serves an economy, but it's not ours. Our economy is in severe and serious distress. The income inequalities that you suggested are very real. But we put up with it because we say, well, that's the way of the world. We look at statistics out of the United States and out of Europe, and we say, well, you know, that income disparity continues to grow there, so that's the way it's supposed to be. Well, the fact is, no. That's exactly the way it is not supposed to be. But it is necessary for us to discuss the past in a dispassionate fashion in order to understand what our present is. Unfortunately, when we discuss things among ourselves, we refuse to look at the past because we don't want to face the ugly. Well, the ugly is that for many, many years, and still to this day, racial politics was a politics not necessarily of white and black, but money and lack of money. And the white community in this New Providence area, a larger percentage of them had some money, and a very small percentage of the black population had some money. So it appeared as if it was white against black, but in very real terms it was money against no money. And that continues to this day. But in order to talk about that, we have to talk about some principles of justice and fair play. We have to talk about honesty, and we have to reflect on that past, and we have to acknowledge that slavery and post-emancipation colonialism and this new colonialism we're living in now is no good for human beings, white or black or brown. But in order to fix it, we have to accept the reality and the truths of the past, and then we have to deal with them honestly. And we have to recognize that within our population, we have lots of immigrants and second and third and fourth generation immigrants. You know, the reality is that around the year 700, there were a lot of people living in the Bahamas. And about 800 years later, the Europeans arranged to get rid of most, if not all of them. And then 150 years, nobody cared anything about these islands because they didn't offer anything. And then some pirates recognized that there was great value here. And then, because after a while the Spanish and the English and the French started to get along a little bit, they all agreed, well, okay, we got to get rid of the pirates. And then they decided, okay, because this is close to Florida, and because the United States is growing in power, we have to recognize that. And so they brought government here. And that government structure continued all of the evils of slavery and continues the structure we have now is that same structure, because we haven't really changed anything. We've changed the legal status of the Bahamas from a colony to an independent state, but we haven't changed how we do things. And faith leaders, Reverend Stewart, most of them, spend all their time telling people how in order to get to heaven, you got to first of all get rich on earth. Instead of helping people to understand that it is love and care and justice and peace that will serve us well now, and as a Christian myself, will also help us get to heaven. Thank you very much.
I should know your name.
Philip.
Philip, yes.
My little brother, and you forget my name.
Philip, I hear your passion. I hear your passion. And there are those who are of the view that there needs to be systemic structural change in the Bahamas as it relates to the makeup of the economy, meaning that we have a borrowing economy where we simply borrow money and we would seek to have to measure up to the IMF and all of those to qualify to borrow money and to run the economy and then borrow some more money, etc., etc. There are those who feel that, well, the taxation issue